Hello folks, Alex here. This is Alex Unabridged, and today I'd like to have a little chat about some of the TV and film adaptations of books that I enjoyed more than the book, and some that I didn't. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, I have a special guest star of Dee Dee joining me today. Dee, get your face off please. So yes, if I'm a little distracted it's because she won't sit the hell down. So yeah, TV and film adaptations. For many years, I was all about the film and TV stuff. I wasn't that into my reading, but now that I am, I'm finding myself thinking about these things quite a bit more in terms of what I've read versus what I've seen and what I like best. And this has really been kicked off by old school April and watching some films that I hadn't seen before, and the one that really kind of made me start thinking again about films and films versus books in terms of adaptations was I recently watched The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, for the first time, and my immediate thought after I finished watching it, because I very much enjoyed it, was oh, this was based on a book, wasn't it? I'll better look that out. And it was based on a book. It was based on a book called Who Goes There? By I think John W. Campbell Jr., if I remember rightly. If I've got that wrong, I will put it up on put it up on the screen. But yes, and it just got me thinking to books versus movies. And also this morning, just before I was due to record this, I noticed that Andrew over at It Came From The Page has just done a similar video in terms of 5 movies that were better than the books. So I will leave a link in the description to his video. It was very enjoyable. He talks about a lot of very different stuff to me. But yes, go and check out Andrew's video. It's very good. So yes, I've got some TV and film adaptations that I enjoyed better than the book, and I've got some that I really didn't. And I've also got a few bonuses of things that I think I need to read the books based on how much I've enjoyed a film adaptation. So yes, so it's just a little kind of chit chat today. There's no ranking in these. There's it's not a top 5 list or anything like that. It's just a few that came to mind. So yes, let's crack on. The first one is Jurassic Park. I only read Jurassic Park last year. When my sister said, "Oh yeah, no, I think you ought to read those. At least read that one anyway, not necessarily The Lost World, but read the Michael Crichton." And so I did. And very enjoyable book, really good book, very different tone to the movie. The movie was one of those childhood movies for me, and I think that's probably why I'll always enjoy it more than the book. It's got that nostalgia factor, but also it's got more likable characters in it. The book, has got some really detestable characters in it, and there are those in the film. People like Dennis Nedry, but yeah, like I think the characters are more interesting in the film. Like John Hammond, particularly, is a far more far more human character, I think, in the film. He's warmer, he's misguided, and he's arrogant, but he's warmer, and he's a lot more likable. Whereas in the book, nope. And the kids in the book, I think, are certainly Lex is just yeah. I really wouldn't have cared if she'd got eaten in the book, whereas in the film the kids they're great, they're grounding, and as a kid you know, that's important. So it's very much, you know, more of a family film. It's, you know, it's, I think, visually speaking, obviously at the time it was quite a big deal in terms of the special effects of the dinosaurs, etc. So yes, that one will always be a film close to my heart, and so I think, however good the book is, it just it can't overtake my love of that film. Next up is possibly a little bit of a controversial one, I don't know, and that is the Lord of the Rings trilogy by Peter Jackson. I came to the Lord of the Rings through the films. I had tried watching them when they first came out and didn't really get on with them. And then my wife, who loves the films and the book, said, no, you need to watch the extended version. So I sat down, you know, for her benefit, really. And going, oh, all right then. Sat down to watch them and loved them. Absolutely loved them. I think I just needed to be in the right place and just have, you know, kind of this really epic span of stuff and not have to wait between each one to go to the cinema and all that kind of stuff. I was quite happy to watch them, you know, in our flat and just like marathon them. And yeah, loved them, and they have become some of my favourite films of all time. And after that, I did go and read the original Tolkien, which I enjoyed, but nowhere near as much. I find Tolkien's writing somewhat dry, I think, in parts, and it's not for me necessarily. I enjoyed the books because I enjoyed the world building, I enjoyed the lore. I have a huge amount of respect for the amount of like imagination and work and research and just, you know, kind of I have respect for what Tolkien did, absolutely. But in terms of, you know, reading the works, I find them quite challenging. I find them quite difficult in terms of they feel a bit like a slog for me in parts. And so, yeah, again, just the visuals of the films, the warmth, the kind of the human kind of quality that comes through in them. And, you know, I think just the filmmaking magic, you know, of how they made them as well. I've watched all the extras and stuff like that, and I'm fascinated with how Peter Jackson translated that kind of work, that epic work, to the screen, and how he did it so well. Next up, we've got one adaptation of a Dickens novel. And for those of you who've watched quite a few of my videos, you will know that I'm not a Dickens fan at all. Generally, I would say I detest Dickens. But there is one adaptation in particular that I absolutely love, and that is A Muppet's Christmas Carol. I've read A Christmas Carol. It's one of the few Dickens I've actually managed to get all the way through, mainly because it's shorter and it's very much in, you know, kind of pop culture, I guess, still today. You know, it's one of those that everybody knows. And so, yeah, so I've read that, and it was, you know, it was decent. I got through it. It was enjoyable enough. But A Muppet's Christmas Carol, it's a work of art. It's the fun factor. I love the fact that it takes these wonderfully humorous characters, you know, the Muppets, and in transposes them into the world of Dickens. It's just fun Christmas tradition to watch that. If it's not on the telly, I will seek it out on one of the streaming services to make sure it is watched at Christmas. It's just one of those where I think I mean, I don't know how old it is now, but it's a timeless classic, shall we say. So yes, A Muppet's Christmas Carol. Into a little bit of TV adaptation now, and that is with True Blood, which is based on Charlene Harris's The Southern Vampire Mysteries. which I've read quite a few of. I think I got up to book 8, I think, in the series. And I came to the books after watching True Blood. I was aware of them before the show started, but I watched the show first. And yeah, I loved that. It was trashy, vibrant, silly stuff, and a nice kind of take on the vampire in pop culture. And I love the setting of it and all that kind of stuff. And I found the characters to be far more interesting, far more engaging, entertaining in the TV show, and some of the changes that they made, certainly within the first few seasons of the show, I think work better than some of the changes that were made, some of the stuff that was in the books. Unfortunately, with both of those series, both the books and the TV show of True Blood, it fell down as it got further in. The first few seasons and the first few books are very good. They're good, trashy TV slash reading, but they just kind of wrote themselves off the page, I feel, a little bit. But certainly, as far as I got, with both, the TV show is I think far superior to the books. Right, last one in the movies, films that I like better than the books, and this one is the modern adaptation of The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss. I read The Invisible Man, the H.G. Wells, and I expected to really like it, and this is a theme with H.G. Wells for me, is that the concept's great, and there's some of the writing which is great, but from what I've read of his, he tends to go off on one at some point in stuff that is just, it's sort of relevant. It's kind of like, I guess, a B plot, but it just kind of it takes all the momentum out of the story. I felt that way about War of the Worlds as well. And so I was kind of disappointed with the book in that respect. I wanted it to be more engaging. And then the film, although the film's very different because it's very much updated, it's kind of taken the concept and the sort of the story, the kind of crux of the story, and has brought in other themes as well, like domestic violence and manipulation and all that kind of thing. I think it still has the essence there, at its core. And I loved that film. I mean, I love, Elizabeth Moss anyway. I think she's fantastic. But the kind of the intimacy of that film and the tension, and the effects, although they're quite simple, the effects were fantastic. And yeah, it's just, it's one that I was really surprised by, because it's not at all faithful in terms of the plot. It takes, as I say, it takes the concept and kind of plays with that. But it's one that I've kind of seen several times now, because I like stuff with that kind of tension in it. And yeah, fantastic ensemble piece, fantastic cast in that. So yes, so that is those are the ones that I enjoyed more than the book. Some that I didn't then. Let's start with ones that they're not necessarily bad adaptations. I just prefer the books or the stories. And the first one is The Mezzotint. The story is by M.R. James. And the adaptation I'm talking about is a BBC adaptation from a few years ago that was on at Christmas, that was adapted by Mark Gatiss, and starred Rory Kinnear, I believe. And it was a very good, entertaining Adaptation. It's not that it played for comedy, but there was a certain tone to it that I felt kind of removed some of the tension in it a little bit. Um, Whereas in the story's quite chilling, and the adaptation it had that element to it, but there was something about, I think maybe it was because it was translated into the visual. It just kind of it didn't have the impact that the text did for me. Um, I very much enjoyed I think that's my favorite M.R. James story. Um, but yeah, it wasn't bad by any means. It was well directed, it was well acted, it was well produced. It was short. I think it was only about half an hour, 20 minutes, and it was a perfect little thing for kind of Christmas. Little dark story for Christmas on the BBC. But yeah, it lost the impact for me that the story had. Okay, next up, we've got The Exorcist. And this is a very personal one because The Exorcist was the horror movie that when I was 18, it was the first horror movie I went to see at the cinema. It was on re-release the year I turned 18, and I went with my friends. It was meant to be a fun night out, go and get a bit scared, and do it all together. So there's strength in numbers. Well, I got more than a bit scared. That film, no, I can't watch. I can never watch that again. I will never watch that again. It terrified me. It absolutely terrified me. And because I was with my friends and not confident enough to just kind of go, nope, I'm leaving, I'll see you later. I sat through it, and I know I shouldn't have done that, because I literally didn't sleep for about 48 hours at all, because every time I shut my eyes I had the visuals. So it's too much, that film, for me. It's just too much. It's the visuals and the sounds. I can't do it. I can't do it. But in an effort to try and clear myself of this fear, a few years later, I read the book. And this is actually one of the points where I realised that I can deal with horror in books. I can deal with quite dark and quite, disturbing horror in books, just not visually, because I can censor the visuals. In my mind, I can make it what I want. I can make it as scary as I want it to be, that I can deal with. I read the book, and I loved the book. Absolutely loved the book. I've read it several times, and it did help me kind of sort of clear that real fear, that real kind of sense of being terrified by something. And kind of understand what it was about more as well. I think kind of actually sort of dig into the themes a little bit more, and also just kind of give me a little bit of space to kind of process why I was scared of it. As I say, that's why when I realised that it wasn't the themes in it, it wasn't the concepts in it that scared me to that extent. It was the visuals. It was someone else's visuals that I had no control over, and once they're in my head, they stick in my head, visuals. So if it's too much, they ain't going nowhere. The book of that is one of my favourite books. Next up, we have got The Shining, the Kubrick film, based on the Stephen King novel. Again, another one of my favourite books. And this is why I really, for a long time, hated the film of The Shining. I don't hate it anymore, because I studied it at university long after I read the book and I'd first seen it. And I studied it as part of kind of a film studies module with it when I was doing drama. We did some film studies. and I could start to appreciate it for a film in its own right as opposed to an adaptation. The problem for me with the Kubrick film as an adaptation was that a lot of the stuff that I really loved about the book had kind of disappeared. The thing that really niggled me was the disappearance of the topiary animals to be replaced by the maze. And the topiary animals, like I think, are my favourite bit. In you know, kind of favourite sort of set piece in the book, and it just felt like a very different piece. The film, it felt, it just wasn't what I wanted from an adaptation. And I actually watched the 2-part TV movie kind of adaptation, the low budget thing. I forget who made it and when it came out, but I watched that as well. And actually, although it's pretty crap, I prefer that because it's more faithful to kind of the book, if you like, for me. So yeah, I can appreciate The Shining now as actually a fantastic film, but I have to look at it almost as a separate piece. It's you know, it's not what I want as an adaptation of one of my favourite books. So yes, Kubrick's The Shining. Okay, next up we've got The Hobbit by Peter Jackson. Hobbit, again, another one on my top 10 books, top 10 fiction books. Love that story, fantastic little book. One of the sort of talking pieces that I adore. You know, it's a proper good romp. It's you know, imaginative. It introduces you to the world of Middle Earth, etc. And yeah, I absolutely love it. And so I was really excited to hear that Jackson was going to be doing The Hobbit as a movie, 2 movies, then 3 movies. You know, because of the Lord of the Rings. You know, as we just talked about, Lord of the Rings, I love. And I was thoroughly disappointed. It just didn't work for me. It just really didn't work. I think had it been, you know, 1, maybe 2 movies, it might have worked better. But I don't know. There's something. It was just, for me, it was just kind of a bit. It was a bit of a travesty, that one. I know Guillermo del Toro was originally meant to be directing it, and because of production issues, pre-production issues, getting rights, all that kind of stuff, he had to step away from it because it was taking too long. And I really wish that had not been the case, because I think he could have done something amazing with it. You know, I just recently at Christmas watched his Pinocchio, and absolutely, I love that. I mean, I love Del Toro's stuff generally, and I think he could have done something incredible with The Hobbit. But yeah, it didn't need to be a trilogy. It was just, it felt, it lost the magic from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, for me. And so yeah, I was that was a real disappointing one. You know, for somebody who's a fan of both Peter Jackson and, you know, The Hobbit. And finally, is the one which is, I think, most heinous. And again, it's another one of my favourite books. There's a theme here, isn't there? In fact, my favourite book, which is The Passage, and the TV adaptation of The Passage from a few years ago with, what's his name? Mark Paul Gosselaar, dude from Saved by the Bell. How to absolutely massacre a story. I don't know what was going on there in terms of, like, did the person who wanted to produce that even like the books? Did they care about the books at all? Because they changed it so dramatically for no apparently good reason that it was almost unrecognisable from the book. When they announced they were making it, I thought, oh, this will be interesting. This could be great. You know, epic story could go across different seasons. You get a kind of a visual representation. You get some fantastic, you know, kind of quest stuff, and you know, post-apocalyptic America and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, no, changing the characters that they changed, the way it was, you know, the setup was changed. Just everything about it for me was just nope, absolutely not. And it's one of the biggest disappointments for me in terms of adaptations. So yes, The Passage. Okay, so to finish up then, few stories that I want to read that I've seen the adaptations of, but I've not read as of yet. So first up, the short story of We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, which is what the film Total Recall is based on. I love Total Recall, the Arnie version, not the modern version, the more recent version with Colin Farrell. Not interested in seeing that. There is only one version for me, and it's the Arnie version, from 1991, I believe. Fantastic film, absolutely fantastic film, and yeah, still not read the story. So that is the first one. Next up is Perfume, story of a murderer by Patrick Suskind. Again, I love the film with Ben Whishaw. And Kristen Dunst, I think it is, amongst others. And yeah, I absolutely was fascinated by the film and the story, but I'm yet to read the novel of that. So that is the second one. Next up is The Martian by Andy Weir. I've only ever read one Andy Weir, and that is Project Hail Mary. That is a recent one that, if you've watched the channel, you'll have heard me rave about on several occasions. One of my all-time favourite books. And yeah, I want to read some more Andy Weir. And I really liked the film version of The Martian. I don't know how different it is to the novel, but it's certainly sort of, it feels like it's got, you know, still the Andy Weir humour to it within the film. So yeah, that's one that I will probably read later this year. Next up is one that's possibly a little bit of a surprise, and that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I'm not interested in reading any other Austens, but I absolutely loved the BBC miniseries from, I think, the 90s with Jennifer Ailey and Colin Firth. Some of that is shot at one of the like stately homes that's quite close to me at Lyme Park. The scene where Darcy comes out of the lake, goes for a swim in the lake and comes out of the lake all drenched. So yes, but I loved that, and so I think if there's a Jane Austen that I should read, it's that one. Then we've got The Birds, a short story by Daphne du Maurier. I've never read any du Maurier, but I love the Hitchcock. It's one of my favourite horror films. Which, you know, it's not I'd say massively scary these days, which is why I've watched it. But I just love it. There's a couple of sequences in it that really are chilling. One in particular is the one where she's sat on a bench. Tippi Hedren is sat on a bench, and there's a climbing frame behind her, and first there's one bird on it, and then it kind of goes, you know, you get a close-up of her, and then it pulls out again, and you've got a few more birds, and then all of a sudden you've got like filled with birds. That sequence was really just like, well, that still sends shivers up my spine. I love that film so much. So yeah, when I found out that was actually based on a short story, that one went on the list. So I will find that in an anthology at some point and give that a read. So that is the final one on the stories I want to read that I've enjoyed the adaptations of. So I think that is it from me today. If you've got any favourites, favourite adaptations of books, drop them in the comments. Again, if you want to have a rant about really terrible, terrible adaptations of your favourite books, please feel free to do that as well. And any recommendations of adaptations for me, once again, drop them down below. So thank you very much for watching today. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and think about subscribing for more content. I'll be back very soon with more ramblings on all things bookish. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.